Hello viewers, welcome to Asia TV in conversation with Taha. Today we are at a guest's house. We are not doing this in the studio as we do before. So I am introducing to you Mrs. Neelima Dalmia Adhaar. Neelima ji, thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to interview you.
Thank you, Taha. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to London and this great privilege of sitting in my flat and having this interview conversation with you.
I would like to tell you something. This is the first time we have stepped out of a studio and come to a beautiful place like yours to interview someone.
Well, then there must be really something special about me.
That there is definitely. So, Neelima ji, how I do this is that I always ask our guests to give us a picture into how they managed to get into this life where they are at this moment of time. So, tell us something from your school, university days.
I assume you're asking me about my journey into writing. Well, I was born with the genes to write. My mother was a celebrated Padma Bhushan awardee writer and poetess, and she had more than 40 books published at her name. She started writing at the age of 12, and at the age of 16 she was given the most prestigious prize of Rajasthan for her Hindi book. It was a book on poetry, and from there she took off, and there was no looking back. But I have to confess that I never ever thought that I would take to writing. I always thought, or let me say, I always wanted to be a psychologist.
Okay.
Because I had this fantasy that if you're a psychologist, you can get into the minds of people and you can get to know what they're thinking.
True.
Well, I got a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
I did psychology. I did my master's in psychology.
Okay.
And I couldn't get into the minds of people.
Okay.
I make no claims for having the sixth sense to understand people. I've made some terribly awful mistakes in judging people. So my psychology is probably just theoretical.
Okay.
And the only edge that I have, I think it gives me an insight, because my books, all three of them, I'm a published author of 3 books. All 3 of them are based on my ability to get into the souls of the people who I'm writing about. So that's about psychology.
Okay.
And as far as writing goes, I never wanted to be a writer. My mother often told me that you should write, and like every parent does, and she encouraged me to write.
Sure.
And going to the school that I did, the Jesuit school, the training that we get in writing, so it was confined to just that, to writing articles for the school magazine, or a little bit of poetry or dabbling here and there. I never thought I'd be a writer.
Okay.
But I guess it's destiny, and it's the genes which came into play.
Okay.
And one fine day, it's quite bizarre, this story, that I was sitting at a beauty parlor with a friend of mine who's a publisher, and now she's the founder of the Jaipur Lit Fest, which is Namita Gokhale, and she looked at me and she said, "Why don't you write a book on your father?" Just out of the blue.
Wow.
So it must be something to do with that ammonia in the hair, or I don't know what worked, some chemistry worked there. And I told her, I said, "I don't know how to write. How can I write a book on my father?" And she said, "I don't know about any other book, but this book you can write."
Definitely.
And she had a little bit of an insight, because she was very friendly with her husband, in fact, was very friendly with one of my stepbrothers.
Okay.
And she knew my father's life, and she knew that it would make a fascinating book.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "Tell me how to write. I don't know how to write." And she gave me 2 tips. She said, "Go home, take a diary, and start writing everything you remember about your father." My father had died by then.
I see.
And well, just to give you a little bit of a flavor, my father, Ram Krishna Dalmia, was the first owner of Times of India.
Yes.
He was a pioneering industrialist of India during independence.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 6 wives.
Okay.
All at the same time.
Interesting.
The Hindu Marriage Act had changed only in 1950. My mother was his 6th wife, the youngest wife, who was married in 47, and I'm the 4th child of his 6th wife.
Okay.
So writing about my father was like writing, I don't know, a comic story, I think.
Very interesting story.
It was a fascinating story for me, because a lot of things about my father, which happened before I was born, and before my mother was married to him, I didn't know. I only got to know them later. And when I was born, my father was 58 years old.
Okay.
So it was like travel back into time. Everybody knew the story about my father's rags to riches.
Right.
which is graph or trajectory.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knew about what
Happened.
made that person tick.
Right.
So I must say it must be my insight, my learning, my scholarliness as a psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
That I said I don't want to talk about my father's financial wizardry. Everybody knows that, and
Yeah.
finance is not my subject. Psychology is.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know why my father was what he was.
Okay.
What made him tick?
Right.
Who was that man inside? Not the man that the world knew, but the man, the father, the husband, the friend, the not so nice father, the not so nice husband, and the rest of it.
I see.
That's
see.
how.
And how was the book taken by the general public then?
My book went on to be a bestseller. Khushwant Singh wrote the preface for the book.
Okay.
And Khushwant Singh had a special relationship with my father because he was the editor of the Illustrated Weekly when my father owned the Times of India.
Okay.
And he knew my father, and when I went to meet him, because my book had just gone into publication, and I said, will you do the preface? And he said to me, he looked at me, squinted through his thick glasses, and he said to me, he said, oh my God, another syrupy hagiography of this darling girl writing about her darling father. I hate them. And I said, you read it. I had a smile on my face. And
Okay.
it's a not so syrupy. Mistakenly or it's a bit of a misnomer because it's called Father Dearest.
I see.
But that's a bit of a
Well,
sarcasm.
I'm pretty intrigued. I must say, I have to read this book now.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take one from you today.
No, sure, absolutely, my pleasure.
So tell me about your second book then. How did that idea come about?
So after I finished doing Father Dearest, which was a bestseller and very well received by everybody, which kind of astounded me as well because I was a fledgling writer. I didn't think, and even when I was writing, I used to tell myself that even if nobody else reads it, my friends will read it. I really didn't think it would bring me so much into the forefront of the literary world. I didn't.
Right.
The book, the first imprint was, I think, 1,200 copies, and they sold within the first week.
Okay.
It did go on to be a bestseller. It was on the bestseller list.
How many copies have you sold till date?
Indian publishers never tell you
Oh,
that.
you didn't? Okay. Because they have to pay you royalty then. Interesting. Okay.
But I do know that everybody I knew, and even people I didn't know, read the book.
That's very good.
My second book was actually, I had a lot of material left over when I was researching my father's story.
Okay.
So it's really a fictionalized account of extended family.
Mm-hmm.
I've written about Marwari Society, which is our community.
Right.
I've written about things which everybody knows but nobody wants to talk about.
Okay.
I have written as an insider.
Okay.
I have been accused of being a whistleblower, and I have been often questioned, why did you write this? And I said, I'm writing my story.
Yeah.
I
You're
have
telling
a right,
the world what
I have a right to, we have to address our angularities and we
Yes.
have to come to terms with them.
Very true.
So this was just I won't call it a sequel, but yes, it was a whole lot of information which I had collected while I was doing my father's biography, and then I put it into a story.
Okay.
That was the second book.
Okay, that's very good. And now I'll ask you about your latest book and it's a very enthralling subject. How are people taking this one?
Surprisingly, this book also has, all my books have a little bit of mystery in their origin.
Right.
After I finished Father Dearest, my friend Neelima Dalmia said to me that you're ready for it now. Why don't you do a story in Kasturba?
Okay.
And I thought to myself that I said, after having written about such a flamboyant man as my father, who has such a checkered career, and with the graph of his life, which every frame is scandal and is sensationalism.
Right.
What will I write about Kasturba, and who the hell is going to read it?
Right.
But I believe that every book has a destiny, and every book has a time of birth. True. And I also believe that it's not you who choose your subjects, it's the subjects who
choose you. True, very true.
So I think I was destined to do Kasturba's story.
Okay.
And I found after Merchants of Death, you know how it is, every writer gets so heady on that fame and intoxicated with that, with just having a bestseller in your hands. So I was again on the search of doing my third book, and I started reading about Kasturba.
So then I'm going to ask you, how many copies did you sell of the second one then? Or did the publishers not tell you again?
My second book was highly controversial.
Okay.
I ran into some trouble finding a publisher. Then I did find a very indulgent publisher, I have to say.
Okay.
And I know that everybody read it.
That's very good.
Because I got mails from all over the world. I got a lot of queries from journalist friends.
Okay.
It was a book which was very well received.
That's very good. That's very good.
So coming back to the third book, I started reading about Kasturba, and I realized that there's nothing about Kasturba. There's very little about Kasturba available. There's a very little information and a whole lot of misinformation. So I was also, I think, a victim of misinformation. And I think the greatest injustice done to us as a people is Richard Attenborough's film Gandhi, which was an iconic film. It got all the Oscars and the rest of it, but it was a completely distorted version of who and what Kasturba was.
Right.
She was portrayed by them as a blink and you miss khadi-clad, head-covered lady who was more like a puppet who just walked in and out of the frames of Gandhiji's life and had really no role to play.
Right.
And to my surprise, I found that Kasturba was quite the opposite of what she was portrayed to be in the film.
Right.
And I knew very little about her. I didn't know that Kasturba was. I did know that she was older than Gandhiji, but I didn't know that she came from a family which was much wealthier than Gandhi's.
Okay.
She came from this Kapadia family of Porbandar, where they were wealthy cloth merchants. She was the only daughter among 5 children and a very pampered child. When she was married to Gandhiji, she was a fiery, passionate, outspoken, bold, courageous young girl. And when she was married to, when she was married into the Gandhi family, and she was married to Papu, she had to completely reinvent herself. She had to go through a huge change in her personality and her life, because first of all, she didn't have that affluence anymore.
Right.
She had to adjust to a huge joint family with, 3 elder brothers, or her 2 elder brothers, her father-in-law and their 2 brothers, a mother-in-law who was although quite indulgent and quite good to her. But all the same, she was, and then to top it all, Gandhiji was a very controlling and a suspicious husband.
Right.
So she had to take that right from the beginning. And as that character sort of started speaking to me, I tuned into her voice and to her cries.
Right.
Then the more I tuned into it, the more I realized how vital it was for me to tell Kasturba's story to the world.
That's so interesting. That is so interesting.
Yeah.
And you just said something like, the author doesn't choose the subject chooses the author.
Absolutely.
And with all this women empowerment we're talking about, with Time's Up campaign, with, it's the time for women to come out and dominate the world, to let them know that they have arrived. I think the subject just really tags along there.
Yes, not only that, it as luck would have it, Kasturba was published in 2016. Had I written it in 2007, soon after I wrote Father Dearest, maybe it wouldn't have been received the way it is today. Because that space is there. We're ready for this story now. We're ready to listen to a woman's voice.
Very true.
We're ready to accept that Kasturba was as important as Gandhiji, not only in the movement, but I will even say that had Kasturba not been Gandhiji's wife, Gandhiji couldn't have been Mahatma.
That's very interesting, and I hope our viewers will take that as a big compliment for Kasturba ji. So, how's this book doing? How well has this been received worldwide?
I have travelled to, the book was launched in New York in 2016 at the New York Lit Fest.
Okay.
So Kasturba has taken me from Sabarmati to Hudson to all over India. I've literally been on a Bharat Darshan. I have gone to most of the cities with my book promos. I don't know the exact number of copies that were sold, but the publishers have translated it in Hindi. There are 3 more regional language translations which are in the offing. I think Telugu, Bengali and Gujarati, if I'm not mistaken. And we have just come out with the paperback edition. So that should give you some kind of insight into the number of books sold.
Right.
I do know that Kasturba, maybe it's because of the timing and social media and everything, which is so powerful a tool these days to advertise, it has reached and touched the souls of, I think, every corner of India.
Yes. No, I can vouch to that because I've just spoken at the Telegraph office about the Inclusiveness Conference, and we spoke about the Me Too and Times Up campaign. And I think everybody in this world is listening to the women's story.
Yeah.
So I think you rightly said the timing is right for this. I'm going to be cheeky and ask you a question. You know the Adhaar in your surname, is the Adhaar in India named after that?
Yeah, I would love to say that. Unfortunately not. But I very often get this where people tell me that your name has caused havoc within the country because there's a law now that everything has to be linked to the Aadhaar card, your mobile phone, your bank account, and we guys are just not used to that kind of discipline.
Right.
So Aadhaar is pretty dominant, and whether they like it or lump it, the ones who don't know believe that it belongs to me.
That's very interesting to know again. So where can people find information in the UK or in Europe to buy your books?
My book was, Amazon is the publisher of the book.
Okay.
Because it was published by Tranquilla Western, which was bought over by Amazon last year.
Right.
And in fact, Amazon has bought the rights for the other 2 books as well.
All right.
So all the 3 books are available on Amazon. There was a plan to have them available here in the bookstores in the UK as well, but I don't know if it's on yet. And anyway, online shopping is like the easiest and everybody does it. Yeah.
And I'm sure I'm going to get you into our studio next time when you're in London, and you'll have the information by then. And viewers, thank you to Neelima ji for giving us the time and opportunity to interview her, and thank you so much for being on my show. I will love to have you in the studio next time.
Thank you. It will be my pleasure, and I will be there.
Thank you, viewers, and I will see you next week. Until then, goodbye.